Hello, everyone from our quarantine hub here on Calvert Street. I just wanted to send a quick video to give some context for our upcoming meeting so everyone feels on the same page and ready to go on our board meeting this upcoming Friday. I really appreciate the time that you're going to spend with us and your flexibility. Unfortunately, we aren't going to be able to meet this quarter in person as we had hoped, as you all know. So we pray and hope that we'll get to do that at some point, but really appreciate your flexibility both in the timing and the venue for this quarter's meeting. This year really started out really in an exciting way. We had almost weekly requests from new churches for coaching, and it was just really amazing to see God bringing people to us, even people we hadn't sought out or people that we had reached out to even months or years ago, resurfacing and God really bringing us to them and them to us to serve. We also got to go to Atlanta and make a lot of really cool connections there at a large special needs conference, and we had a great time there. And the next weekend after we got back from Atlanta is when all of the shutdown happened. So of course that kind of halted us in our tracks. We had really some momentum going, and we were actually getting to a place where we were wondering how we were going to handle any more churches that were coming on board, since we were getting just a huge spike in requests and people reaching out. But that all kind of screeched to a halt with COVID-19, and we have been prayerfully considering how to move forward. From our perspective and just interactions with people on our end, we are planning and anticipating that we probably won't be able to have in-person coaching relationships with churches until the fall at the earliest, not only because of quarantine, but also because churches are really preoccupied at the moment with some of the urgent needs and transitions. And so even pastors that we've talked to as we've been reaching out to each of the churches that we've been engaged with have just shared that this agenda and disability inclusion has kind of fallen to their back burner, as we understand. But in the midst of that, we are reaching out to churches and trying to encourage ways for them in the midst of this to consider their disability community. We're producing some content, but also doing really personalized reaching out to help just nudge people in that direction and answer questions that they might have. Katie's got a support group that she's helping Severn Run do for mothers virtually in this time that's been a really stressful time for families with kids with special needs. We've got some guidance that we've been sending out or sharing with leaders about making virtual services accessible. So we've got some resources in that end, but we're still trying to keep that personal touch, just reaching out personally to churches that were either in the pipeline or that have our alumni have been a part of our work and relationships. But since some of our kind of main modalities of working with churches are on hold for a bit, at least in the way that we had envisioned them to be, we have some bigger projects that we have decided to dedicate this time to making some headway in. This past quarter, Hunter and I had a really wonderful meeting with Pastor Mike and Josh on strategy, kind of looking at the bigger picture for the Banquet Network. And one of the things that came out of that was just conversations about scalability of our model. And we came up with kind of a model for cascading the training and the hands-on relationships that we're having with churches through volunteer coaches to other locations and states. And so we have our first volunteer coach in Texas, who's a young guy who's willing to help us kind of craft this model. And during this COVID time, one of Katie's main projects is creating the whole model for how to train and launch and supervise and kind of use this volunteer coaching model to build it out, so that when the time comes, and to recruit volunteer coaches so that there can be people in relationship, flesh and blood relationship with churches in different places where we can't be all the time. So I'm really excited about that. We'll share a bit more about it on Friday. The second big project that we're working on during this time is something that we talked about in our last meeting as kind of a pipe dream, but now that we have some focus time and people are on their computers, we have decided to undertake a national survey, or at least attempt to undertake a national survey, to look at what the status of disability ministry and reaching people with disabilities looks like right now in our country, since there's not really any good data on that. We are, of course, the most challenging part of this initiative is getting a good sampling frame for unbiased data. So we're reaching out to different organizations. We'll probably take a bit more of a market research approach and understanding that there are limitations to what we can do, as we are not a research organization. We had looked into doing some research with Barna, but that was out of our price range. It's like $100,000. So we are taking on kind of a small scale market research initiative, looking at surveying churches through different databases where we have access to publicly. So we will be eager to see if anybody has insight and would like to help Allie do that. She's kind of leading on that. And then the third big project that we're taking on in this time, which Hunter and I are kind of leading on, is developing a missions training. So looking at how mainstream or general practitioner missionaries can be trained in disability so that they would be able to, or be confident to, be equipped to consider and reach people with disabilities as they're doing their missions work. We have a partner, Jim Baker, who works with Reach Global, a missions organization that is looking at specifically using this curriculum, but we would like to make it available to other missions organizations or other missionaries as well. And so we're looking at kind of 4 or fewer hours to kind of give an overview and move missionaries from a place where they don't think about disability or don't view disability as something that falls within their scope or realm of what they can do, to something that can be involved. And we have a few of your names next to some of the topics that we'd like to cover, so we'll be talking about that as well, and would be eager to hear feedback and suggestions. So those are the 3 big projects. We have some kind of sub-projects going on in the background. Hunter's been working a ton on our knowledge management and cataloging some of the resources that we're producing so that they're more easily accessible and so that we are more efficient in the way that we're working. And we are excited to be moving on those, and actually grateful for the time that God's given us during this disruption to focus on some bigger things and pray about and really seek what it is that we could use this time well for. So each board meeting, we really like to have kind of one big question that we'd like to get your input or advice on. And so this quarter, our big question is around adapting our model, particularly our funding model, to this current situation that we're in. So I think all of us on the last call in January discussed how we were trying to get more churches engaged in partnering with us, and that model is kind of based on us being able to work with churches and then invite them to partner with us after they've received our services for free, if they feel like it was valuable and they'd like other churches to be able to experience that. But now, with kind of the delay and the gap that we're going to have in thoroughly working with churches, I think we need to consider some alternatives to that. We have applied for the SBA loans and grants through the CARES Act that are available for nonprofits, and we're applying for other grants as we can. But we would just love to hear, and if you would pray about and think about in advance of our meeting, what ideas you might have as far as how can we adapt our funding model in this time when we may have a gap in real deep hands-on relationship with individual churches, and when we also know that churches are struggling themselves financially, and a lot of people are struggling financially themselves. So we're looking for guidance and advice on adapting our funding model in this time. Anything that you might have. We're really blessed to have some really generous supporters, and from our BCMD grant last year, still having some reserve that allows us to continue our operations through this year. But we're currently thinking that our anticipated or hoped growth that we would have liked to see come out of this year is probably less feasible than we had anticipated or hoped, and might make next year more difficult. So that would be really wonderful if you could be thinking about that and help to advise us and share with us how you'd like to be involved in that particularly. Let's see here. So if you have any other questions before the meeting, feel free to email me or call or text, and we'll be happy to do that. We'll allow a little more time at the end as well for any other questions and other things you want to raise. But we are really, really grateful for your wisdom and the time that you're setting aside to be with us on Friday, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thanks.